Hello there people, Vestin here. What follows is, to the best of my knowledge, the most extensive and late NextFest overview anyone has ever created. It covers NextFest winter or first quarter of 2024 and it spans 79 games. Each of them will receive a minute, 60 seconds, during which I'll tell you its name, its genre, what it looks like, what the gameplay is like, what I make of it, and I'll rate it out of 5 stars. Let the insanity commence! The very first game is #Drive Rally by Pixel Perfect Dude. It is, as you might have intuited, a racing game. It features simple but adequate graphics, the menu music is cute and upbeat, and throughout the race you are piloted by someone who sounds a lot like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who provides you with encouraging, campy, and downright eccentric commentary. In terms of gameplay, you drive down the racing track from start to finish rather than going in laps, and you try to cross the finish line as early as possible. I am led to believe that that's what a rally is. The game will also feature some car customization and a career mode. Your car is called Doggo 1984, which amused even me. Hell, I've actually enjoyed playing this, even though I suck at driving. Speaking of which, the devs know you'll slam into things, drive into the forest and such, and there are voice lines ready just for such occasions. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. God damn it! What do we have here? Game number 2, Artifact Seeker Legend of Aurorium. This one's very straightforward to classify these days. It's a survivors-like roguelite. The presentation is comprised of cartoony 3D graphics in combat and 2D graphics in menus. The sound effects are unremarkable, there's no voice acting, and all you get when encountering events are sketches. Gameplay has its macro and micro aspects. On one hand, you traverse a series of nodes and an adventure graph, choosing among the branching paths, spending your resources on upgrades for a given run. On the other hand, you have the survivors-like combat stages, where you slay beasties and level up from scratch every time. Idle claims to be a rather uninteresting entry to a crowded genre. Sure, it gets the job done, but it's got nothing special to offer. It's as generic as it can get. Sure, you can point to it combining the roguelite staple of node traversal with the survivors-like encounters as events, but these systems don't even interact in a meaningful way. If anything, this detracts from the entire experience, since time spent on the map in any given encounter is minuscule, so you don't really need to manage monsters on any given arena particularly well. 3 out of 5 stars, mediocre. Damn you! Game number 3, Astral Party. It's a digital party board game akin to Super Mario Party and such, except with chibi little anime girls. The style is unmistakably anime, the music is chirpy, the atmosphere playful, and the UI humongous. How do you play this? You play your cards, roll the dice, and occasionally fight people on the board. Along the way you collect coins, you trade coins in for stars. When you get 3 stars, you win! Fairly straightforward, as these things are obviously meant to be. Let me just admit this outright, I couldn't find a single match when checking this one out, and believe me, I've tried. For a bit. I get the gist of it, it's a party game with adorable waifus. If I was serious about this, I'd probably hold off judgment until having played it with people. But I'm not, so I won't. It seems rather unremarkable, but serviceable if you're into this kind of thing. 3 out of 5 stars. Moving swiftly on. NPC knockdown. Excellent. Money stolen. We won the battle and half of our coins, which helped us get the last star. Stay at the safe point and you are the winner. Number 4, Backpack Battles. It's an inventory management game. It looks cute, adorable even, although somewhat basic. It has simple sound effects and rather generic music. The gameplay loop is rather simple to grasp. You arrange your precious items in the available slots, trying to play into available synergies. Then you watch a battle unfold automatically. Afterwards, you receive gold with which to buy more stuff that you then try to arrange again. It's a neat little idea. The reason this can be annoying in other games is quite straightforward. Over there, you invariably see it as a tedious obstacle, something to get out of the way so you can go back to what you actually want to do, like slaying monsters and completing quests. Over here, this is the core activity. It's quite fun too, at least to a point. Once you get enough stuff and enough slots, the combinatorial explosion of trying to keep track of every single interaction can become overwhelming. And every single additional bag, as well as every single additional item, can soon force you to tear everything down and start from scratch again. But that's the game. The UI could probably be a bit more helpful and some quality of life improvements could be implemented. But overall, it's a good game. 4 out of 5 stars. This on my foe. And I have won. Number 5, Backrooms. It's a Backrooms walking simulator. Its graphics are done in underwhelming 3D. There are very few sound effects, no music, no voice acting, and far too much head bobbing. The only animation that actually looked good was the wake-up sequence. How do you play it? You meander and try to progress and ultimately get out. This one's awful. You get the option to play in peaceful mode without monsters or puzzles, making the entire experience even more shallow than it already is. The game loads the rest of the level as you're going through it, taking you by surprise more than the monster, and taking quite a while on quite a modern machine. This demonstrates an impressive level of technical ineptitude, arguably on par with the terrible design. Look, I don't care if it's streamer bait because it's got a jump scare with loud noises. It's awful on multiple fronts, has no redeeming qualities. 1 out of 5, stay away from this. The 6th game is Balatro. It is a card game roguelite with all sorts of cards. It's got delightfully stylish retro graphics, the ambient music is really nice, and the sound effects are simple but very satisfying. Here's how it works. You play poker hands with multipliers and a variety of unusual cards, buffs, status effects. You also open booster packs to get more cards. You get consumables, you get stuff that affects the entire run, you get collectibles that expand your collection permanently between runs. I have to say, this is a pleasant little game. By the time I'm posting this is a black horse, but I'm sticking with my original impression. It's a nice game, though it can get somewhat repetitive by its very nature. On the other hand, there's a lot here to spice things up. Plenty of unlockables, plenty of content, and within each run, you, as you make your choices, have to keep track of layers upon layers of rule alterations based on what the RNG has bestowed upon you. 4 out of 5 stars, good stuff. Oh, 2 queens of the exact same suit, but that's not the suit I'll be matching. Fine, give me the stone. Lucky number 7 is Beatslayer. It is a node-based, rhythm-based, isometric beat-em-up roguelite. It's beautiful, it's funky, it's got this comic book aesthetic with bold outlines, it's got the retro vibe with magnetic music cassettes, the music is brilliant, the sound effects great, and the voice acting spot on, wonderful. In Beatslayer, you slay bots to the beat. You pick your path between battles, follow the story, and get upgrades for your runs. The game is largely controller-based and requires a decent sense of rhythm, which I sorely lack. To make matters worse, I think I just didn't have a clear enough mind and enough focus at the time to rise to the challenge. My ineptitude aside, this is a wonderful title. It was incredibly well polished for a demo. And it's great at what it's trying to accomplish. Originally, I had it marked as 4 out of 5, probably a temporary bout of insanity. 5 out of 5 stars. Excellent.
I need to concentrate better.
Number 8 is Beyond Hanwell. As a first-person horror game. The presentation is relatively good, the 3 graphics are suitably grimy, and the sound effects beefy. Notably, the voice acting is hugely disappointing, ranging in quality from fur to bad. As for gameplay, you wander around an abandoned hospital, hunt for keys, and try to get out. The game features a couple of jump scares. Crafting is also planned as a feature, though beyond the scope of the demo. The game is suspenseful, it is genuinely startling at times. I've eagerly picked it up on the basis of it being placed in Westminster. I figured Westminster was the best Minster. Alas, it has failed to impress except for the following twist. Unlike Resident Evil, where everyone's initially blindsided and then individuals rise to the challenge and grapple with the power of a nefarious corporation and people within it, this game has the British government know about the bizarre outbreak of mutant monstrosities for long enough to order warning posters to be placed around the facility, instructing people to avoid eye contact with them and seek shelter. Rather than being a story about greed and active malice of well-organized villains, it is a story about institutional incompetence and individual negligence. 3 out of 5, meh. Well, that actually got me. 9 is Blacksmith, Song of Two Kings. It's a game about making things in a very hands-on way. You arrange parts, cut them down to size, secure them with rivets, and so on. It features adequate fancy graphics, forgettable music, satisfying sound effects. As for gameplay, you take orders, upgrade your house, expand your workshop, buy materials, explore the map, and ultimately craft things by dragging materials and tools around. The game's clunky. You can't make right angles reliably, you have to eyeball it. You have to eyeball everything. Worse yet, you can use the blueprint for reference, but you can't have it as a semi-transparent overlay. Nor can you actually measure things or line them up all too well. Perhaps that's the idea, perhaps you're supposed to make rough approximations, but it doesn't sit well with me. Curious concept, poor execution, I'd say. 2 out of 5 stars. Oh no. Is this fine? Excellent. We enter the double digits with number 10, Bloodkill. It is a retro FPS. It features janky, low-poly, simple polyhedra scenery mixed with well-animated, detailed monsters, good pumping music, and good to great juicy sound effects. It has you run around and shoot stuff, occasionally pulling a lever and finding secrets. Long story short, there's more than merely a fine line between being deliberately stylized and outrageously bad. Here's a couple of highlights. I could pull one lever remotely from halfway across the level, just by pressing the use button. Most of the scenery isn't retro, it's blocky garbage. The level stretches up into the sky and you get to see rooms just floating in midair with particle effects sometimes leaking through walls. Sure, monster squishing, satisfying movement is swift, weapons have a good feel to them. I can't recommend this though. It's not even average. I've even managed to get stuck at the end, either due to lack of clarity as to the next destination, and this isn't a game where you're supposed to spend time figuring that one out, or due to a messed up trigger. With that presumed soft luck, I rate this 1 out of 5 stars. Very bad. Number 11 is Breachway. It is a roguelite deck builder in space. The presentation is comprised of Western cartoony science fiction graphics with moderately beefy sound effects and unobtrusive music. In Breachway, you navigate the adventure graph, tactically play your cards during encounters, upgrade your gear, and shift all power to lasers. You actually get to dynamically allocate the ship's power to various subsystems. This started out unimpressive, but it drew me in quite swiftly. Unfortunately, I can't quite pinpoint what makes it great. Of all the things, what stands out to me the most is the UI. It's very clean, very elegant, and stylish. The mechanics seem well thought out, and there's quite a few moving parts to keep things interesting. The ship, its components, the crew, diplomatic relations with a variety of factions. The writing is also solid. All this needs is voice acting. When looking at bits of footage, no single part seems to convey the fun of playing this. And I've even started second-guessing myself now, but the experience is genuinely enjoyable, and mostly comes from the flow of action, which in a turn-based game is going to happen at a rather measured pace. 5 out of 5 stars, and if I'm being too generous, then so be it. It would diminish morale. We're up to a dozen. Number 12 is Bring Me That Shwarma. It's a visual novel about Shwarma. I wish I was kidding. The style is an interesting mix of realism and anime. The game features no voice acting, and the background music is just that atmospheric background that mostly sets the tone. As for gameplay, it's a visual novel. You largely click through it. It hardly even features any forks in the road, so it's quite a linear experience. Look, I generally adore the premise of having an ingenuous protagonist in a ludicrous world rather than the other way around. Still, this is just a bit too stupid for my taste. The game decided to stick with its premise to the bitter end, and it showed it. I don't think anyone can play this and come away with the sense that it should have, indeed could have, been more Shwarma based. From that point of view, if what you're looking for in video games is the Shwarma motif, look no further. Considering the single-mindedness of this project, I don't even know what could have been improved here without compromising on the overall vision. I guess a plethora of choices and thus different side paths and endings would have been part for the cause in terms of the genre. The game isn't even bad. It's this food-themed, depressing Russian fever dream you may or may not want to experience. 3 out of 5 Shwarma stars! Get out of my head! It was number 13. Just my luck, too. Another entry in the surprisingly crowded sub-genre of noir-themed point-and-click adventure games with anthropomorphic animal protagonists as detectives. The black and white visuals, though technically optional, complement the style and setting very well. Same goes for the music and sound effects, I guess. The voice acting is similarly apt. The gameplay is what you probably know and love. Typical point-and-click fur with hotspot highlighting and minigames. The hotspots are an intriguing affair. You can't quite rely on your senses to spot interactive objects. Many things that seem to stand out are just background, and what looks like background can be interactive, hence the desperate need for highlighting. Despite that seemingly fatal flaw, the entire thing falls into place like a cynical divorced cop with a substance abuse problem and no hobbies. It just works. 5 out of 5 stars.
You can do it.
Number 14 is Children of the Sun. My goodness. It's arguably a gruesome puzzle game where you clear out targets with a magic bullet. The presentation is heavily distorted. It seems like quite a deliberate artistic choice, and it's very fitting. The graphics are both gory and impersonal. The music is suspenseful and eerie, and there are no sound effects except for the ones made by your bullet's impact. The gameplay has you first canvas an area, stalking your prey, the titular cult, and marking them for elimination. Eventually you proceed to execute your plan. You can redirect the bullet after every hit, but there's more to it. You can target gas tanks and birds. You can aim for special vulnerable spots to build up the ability to curve the bullet in midair. Often a given map offers an optional objective like routing the bullet through fire. There's a decent bit of depth to be had here. This game is a masterpiece. Beyond the cerebral task of plotting the bullet's course and the dexterity necessary to execute, there's the disturbing story of the protagonist, the girl. You catch glimpses of her past through unvoiced cutscenes. I could go on and on. 5 out of 5. Number 15 is Coffee Caravan, a time management game about making and serving coffee. It features minimalist low-poly 3D graphics, a very basic but cute loop for its music, and satisfying crunchy sound effects. The gameplay, believe it or not, has you traverse an adventure graph. This mechanic has really taken off. I guess this makes the game a roguelite. You choose between nodes, upgrade your equipment, and the core encounters are you serving people a piping hot beverage. It's very bare-bone and simplistic, but there's something genuinely relaxing and downright mesmerizing about it. Not necessarily a title you would spend an excessive amount of time on, but there's nothing wrong with that. 4 out of 5 stars. It's not brilliant, but it's genuinely good. A shop or difficult customers? Fine, send me to a shop. What exactly can I purchase here? A turbo espresso machine? Another counter? Why would I want a counter? And yeah, for combining and storing things. Number 16 is Contenders Arena, multiplayer FPS with robots. The graphics are relatively basic, Unreal Engine fur. They're not particularly imaginative, but they're competent. The same applies to sound effects. The female commentator is lovely. She's got a very warm voice and clear pronunciation. It may sound like a weird thing to focus on, but I think it adds character, and I believe you can get away with a lot in games if you've got an appealing style. Speaking of getting away with things, the game features 3v3 capture the flag. Get it? You need to get into the enemy base, snatch the flag, and get away. Anyway, you get 2 abilities and an ultimate, plus some advanced movement features. Grappling hooks, sliding, rail riding. Looking back at the footage, the game seems sleek and solid, though it's arguably the game's engine doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Look, I've seen some competitive FPSs over the years. Advanced mobility or verticality have been the selling points for quite a few of them. This offers nothing particularly new or imaginative. There's no unique selling proposition here. It hurts me to say this because this is well polished despite its early stages. It's a well executed concept, it's properly designed, and it's a disappointment because that alone is not enough. 3 out of 5, I'm sorry. Game number 17 is Copycat. It's a cat simulator. It's got adequate graphics, good voice acting, and acceptable sound effects. As for gameplay, you run around and do cat things with an unfolding story of your owner and her previous cat. The mechanics of general platforming and latching onto surfaces are somewhat clunky and disappointing, with an actual possibility of getting stuck diagonally in a counter. Now, this isn't some fringe use case. These aren't uncharted waters. Jumping around is fairly integral to this game, and platformers have existed for a while now. I appreciate the dedication to the theme. The game does explore the psychology, physicality, and perspective of a house cat quite extensively. The elderly lady, on the other hand, had me worried the entire time. She's totally gonna die, isn't she? Anyway, it's a mixed bag. Needs more polish, but could turn out to be quite a curious narrative experience otherwise. 3 out of 5, work on it.
Fish can be slippery little buggers, can't they?
Ouch!
Number 18, CosmoPirates. It's a sci-fi deck builder with free movement on a grid instead of nodes. The graphics... My goodness, the graphics, they're ugly. They've got this janky cartoon style. The music is annoyingly upbeat and the sound effects are rather generic. As far as the gameplay is concerned, you travel around, get into scraps, collect new cards and experience events. It's a rather solid formula. The execution is another matter entirely. I get it, the game's trying to be funny. I haven't missed that part. It's trying to be the zany, ridiculous romp across the galaxy, and it kinda gets the job done, but it isn't sufficiently well structured to hold interest. All the elements seem to be there, but they just don't add up to a fun experience. It's not satisfying to play this. It's ugly, it's simplistic, and anything it does gets done better than other titles. If this is your style, Godspeed, but for me, it's a subpar title. 2 out of 5 stars. Game number 19 is called Crown Wars, The Black Prince. It is a tactical RPG with out-of-combat squad and resource management. So basically, a strategy game. The game boasts glorious Unreal Engine graphics, punchy sound effects, and voice acting ranging from excellent to somewhat awkward. I still don't know if it's a matter of getting used to it, but in my mind, any fantasy female frontliner like a warrior or barbarian needs to have a gruff voice. If your voice is higher pitched than mine, it just sounds silly. Anyway, the game has you equip and level up squads on tactical missions. You have separate points for movement and action. There are plenty of buffs and debuffs to apply, consumables to use, and objects in the environment to interact with, not to mention all the cover and other tactical opportunities afforded by the terrain. The narrative is firmly set during the 100-Year War, except with the black magic. The writing is solid, but aside from that, there's also so much you can do to both functionally deck out and cosmetically customize your mercs. It's easy to see you growing attached to them. Extremely promising title, 5 out of 5. No! Although I get it, you know, in the end, if I were to get into this game, you can customize your build! 20 is Crypt Custodian, a platformer where you hop around, fight monsters, collect resources, interact with characters, and upgrade your little dead kitty. Its graphics are cartoony and cute 2D, the regular music is soothing, the combat music is appropriately intense, and the sound effects, that's right, satisfyingly punchy. The plot is ludicrous but delightful. I'm genuinely curious as where it will take us. Will we even see the palace? Is it even worth seeing? Bah. The controls are geared towards the controller, which is fine, I guess. They feel smooth and crisp. I could claim that the combat is difficult, but the attacks are telegraphed so clearly that I only have myself to blame. All in all, this is a wonderful, whimsical little game that I have no qualms about rating 5 out of 5 stars. 21 is Cryptmaster. It's a word-guessing and typing game about the living dead, like single-player charades with zombies. No, hear me out. It's got a monochrome aesthetic with many jagged edges, but not strictly low poly. The sound effects are great, and the voice acting is hilarious. You go around, collect souls, eventually defeat monsters, you recover memories by guessing objects and Necromancer describes to you, and you interact with the world almost exclusively by typing. There was this monster with a B shield that meant I couldn't attack him with words containing the letter B. I got friend-zoned by a statue. It's an incredible, highly original, hilariously written game. It's got everything: human exploration, puzzles, combat. Granted, there are few things in this world I like more than words in the English language. 5 out of 5. I can't faithfully describe it and sound sane.
This should be an easy one. Tell me, how would you describe the sun?
It's bright.
Yes, in fact, it's very bright indeed.
The 22nd game is Deathbound, a Souls-like with dynamic character switching, as in at the press of a button. It's got grim, high-quality graphics, great animations, great sound effects and voice acting, and hauntingly melancholic music. The game has you walk around and defeat monsters while collecting loot and managing your stats. Let's get this out of the way. The protagonist, one of the four that are somehow fused together, the protagonist Throne is detestable. It's very much intentional, but I can't shake my visceral disgust with him. You know how philosophically to value existence and life can be considered a rather arbitrary choice? Theron's devoted to serving death. On a more technical note, you can't use the mouse in menus, even though you can actually use it for mouse look. That threw me for a loop. I also had an awful time pulling anything off, but you have to get used to the mechanics of such a game to keep track of your stamina and such. I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars rather than 5 for the issues with the controls, and in part because I really hate that guy. I hope I'm not being too harsh.
Rat! You bastard son of a whore! Traitor! Traitor!
23 Demons for a top-down shooter with body horror galore. It's got that retro CRT distortion effect and dark rooms filled with mist. It's a rather interesting concept. Things go wrong in a bioresearch facility. Sounds familiar enough. You're an insider, scientist working in the facility as things go wrong. Still rather pedestrian. Here's the twist. Rather than serving as a tutorial and a backstory for a beloved and long-running franchise, you not only try to stop the initial outbreak, but you succeed, assuming you win. Here's how. The facility is divided into discrete rooms. There's the room you're in, there are the rooms the infestation has claimed, and then there's the exit. You can use security tokens to put rooms in lockdown, cutting off access to them and forcing the vile growth to path around it. If things go well, you can stop it from reaching the exit and thus stop it from escaping. Along the way, you find a variety of weapons, plenty of things to throw, and fight minor, independent manifestations of the bile horror on the loose. Watch out though, these things are deadly and you're a squishy human. One wrong move and you're done. On the other hand, less glamorously, there's no key binding and the trust stations are laughably bad in places. Still, this is a solid little indie horror game, 4 out of 5 stars. How Russian are you? What is this? 24, 24 Diceomancer. It's a deck builder roguelite with colored mana and number-altering dice powers. The graphics are crude and minimalist, the music unremarkable, the sound effects punchy. In Diceomancer, you traverse the adventure graph, flee from the encroaching mist, make choices, fight enemies, collect loot, and try to get to the end. Sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? Furthermore, the translations are pretty jarringly bad. Surely this means I, of all people, will take a rather dim view of it, right? Surprisingly enough, this game is top shelf. The mechanics are brilliant and the writing humorous despite mistakes. Even the graphics have a charm, much like the one of the Guild of Dungeoneering. I had all this criticism in mind, but then I've realized that I couldn't tell myself away. I can't even dock points down to 4. It's a 5 out of 5 from me. I see it as a sleeper hit. Smoke is really nice. The names and whoa, birds! Birds. Quarter of 125. Dread Dawn. Dread Dawn is an isometric zombie survival game. Its graphics are amateurish trash. It doesn't really have any music beyond ambient noises, and the sound effects are muddy and there's an insufficient variety of them. The game has you search places, craft items, fight zombies. I guess I couldn't really bring myself to play too much of this one. For one, the pacing is atrocious. I don't think I've ever seen a demo drag on this much. The dialogue is stilted and weird. The atmosphere is lacking, the gameplay is boring, the combat is uninteresting, and the plot is idiotic. For whatever reason, this garbage was at the top of the list of most played demos. Considering how poorly this is made, between a difference in taste, with gamers worldwide loving it on one hand, and some Chinese machinations to drive the game to the top of the list artificially, I'd lean towards the conspiracy theory. What the hell? 1 out of 5 stars, I don't want to see this ever again. Dreamcall is game number 26. It is a Backrooms walking simulator. It's got nice graphics powered by Unreal Engine 5, almost no sound effects or music, by which I mean there is a place where you hear some music so you know to go there, and you do hear your footsteps or sloshing of water, but there isn't much to listen to. Like there isn't much to look at. The gameplay is literally this: you wander around, solve a single puzzle, then the demo ends. I guess these are supposed to be little experiences, but there's little there to keep one engaged. The Backrooms are empty stretches of space. Wading through water makes it even more tedious to trudge through the game. There isn't much there to make one think, unless one is to try and wildly speculate about things that do not lend themselves to much rational thought. It's just a bit of terrain to traverse and a single event at the very end. Quite disappointing. Competent on a technical level and graphically appealing, but devoid of any draw or direction. It doesn't even feature enough incompetence to qualify as very bad, so I'll rate it 2 out of 5 stars. That's it? Under number 27, we have Duck Detective, The Secret Salami. What did I say about animal detective adventure games? Here's another one, and there's not just 2 of them. Anyway, the graphics, the characters are highly stylized, outlined 2D stickers hobbling about in 3D space. The music is suitable, sound effects appropriate, and the voice acting divine. It's my personal favorite of unabashed histrionic lunacy without a shred of irony or self-awareness, as in, the game doesn't insult your intelligence by telling you that it's ridiculous as it's being ridiculous. The game has you talk to people, gather evidence, and then explicitly put the clues together to solve mysteries. The demo was very brief, but reasonably amusing. This had me worried that the devs could paint themselves into a corner in terms of writing. From what I understand, the final game chose to be short and funny over dragging on and losing its edge, which is great. It's a 4 out of 5 from me. I know it's not a 5, but it's a good game, and that's nothing to sneer at.
You have to believe me!
Game 28 is Dungeon Ball. It's a PvPvE dungeon crawling experience, a fantasy Tarkov-like. Something around those lines. The dungeons are beautiful with detailed lighting. The sound effects are nice. The gameplay is pretty much what you expect from the genre. Go to a dungeon, fight monsters, grab loot, then use the scroll to open a portal and escape. It's much more difficult than it sounds. Alright, I don't know how difficult this is in absolute terms. I know I suck at it. Now, unfortunately, that probably means I won't be able to do this one justice. It seems good. There are plenty of systems to play around with outside the runs as you prepare yourself, and a decent bit of variety in classes and available customization. Combat also seems fairly skill-based and tactical over mere button mashing. 4 out of 5 stars. Seems good to me. Is he dead? Think he is. Slain him! Give me your loot, buddy. Number 29 is Dungeon Stalkers. It's a PvPvE dungeon crawling experience. This one looks significantly more anime, bright, cartoony, and jiggly. The gameplay is what you'd expect. Explore dungeons, kill monsters, collect loot, escape through a portal. You do have an ever-shrinking circle to keep you on the move, and the twist is that every time the timer runs down and it constricts, something happens. Some random event occurs and forces you to adapt. Other than the fact that I suck at these games, I actually got stuck here through no fault of my own, and it ended up costing me the run. I was not a happy camper. Also, on an unrelated note, the jiggliness is downright silly. The game shows promise, though the genre seems surprisingly saturated for something seemingly so niche. 3 out of 5 stars. It's competent, but not mind-blowing, at least as far as I can tell. Number 30 is Emberward. Now listen closely, it's a node-based tower defense game with Tetris-based maze building. The graphics are beautiful isometric 3D with gentle outlines. They're not quite low poly, but they have these purposefully strong silhouettes that make everything easy to read in the midst of chaos. The sound effects are satisfying and the music is good. Here's how it all works. You have the adventure graph on which you make your macro choices. During the run, you get upgrades, additional towers, and additional Tetris shapes. Well, they're not technically all Tetranimals, but whatever. The encounters are tower defense levels. You place blocks between waves and you can place and upgrade towers between and during them. There are designated buffed spaces that bolster towers placed on them. I've seen a level with mobile platforms. There's a lot going on here. Oh, and you can't place towers directly on the ground. They go on top of blocks. The game is extremely well polished, well thought out, and elaborately designed. It's the best tower defense game I've seen in a while. 5 out of 5 stars. Attack rate of the tower. Oh boy. Game number 31 is Entropy Survivors. It's a rather absurdist Survivors-like. The graphics are in beautiful isometric 3D. It features smooth and intricate animations. The sound sometimes stacks, producing a headache-inducing cacophony. The gameplay is rather usual for the genre. You get your permanent upgrades, then visit locations to face off against monsters, acquire your Pearl Run upgrades by roaming around and slaying them, and try to survive. The game is admittedly very pretty, and even amusing at times. Now, I don't suspect many games that you carpet bomb enemies with enormous sneakers. Alas, this isn't quite enough. The execution is competent, but there isn't really much to keep one engaged here. Entropy Survivors doesn't stand out from the crowd enough. It's a competent entry in the genre, that annoying sound issue aside, but that just makes it a 3 out of 5, which of course isn't bad. But it's not good either. Donk donk, is that it? I think I've defeated it. Furnish Master's the 32nd game. It's a peaceful game about interior design. The graphics are basic and low poly, but serviceable. The music is relaxing ambient. The translations are jarringly bad. The game has you paint things, move things around, and do all sorts of relatively basic redecorating. Alas, doing the above is mired by the somewhat clunky UI. In a game that's supposed to be this relaxing, seamless experience, any speed bump like that is rather unfortunate. The translation issues are also an eyesore. Understandably, in a game about making things pretty and neat, a degree of polish and elegance is to be expected. Yes, even in a demo. Other than that, the game does seem to deliver on its promises, though it's relatively basic. 3 out of 5 stars. Top shelf. Great! This doesn't look Polish! This looks like a bubble pole! The 33rd title is Gatekeeper. It's an isometric arena shooter with upgrades. The graphics are nice, shiny, abstract shapes. The music is pumping with excitement, and the sound effects are appropriately punchy. In Gatekeeper, you go around the arena, shoot things, visit shrines, and complete objectives, all the while upgrading your weapons and stats. It may not sound particularly mind-blowing, and in hindsight, my enthusiasm seems out of proportion. But I remember it being exhilarating. The elements just fall into place properly. The feedback is satisfying with floating damage numbers. I can't overstate the graceful fluidity of the stylized graphics, how neatly designed and balanced the abilities seem, how the movement speed seems just right with a handy boost when out of combat so you can zip across a cleared out area. I guess this is a relatively simple title, designed and implemented very well. Based on my experience, I can only do it justice by rating it 5 out of 5. Yes, chain lightning, please. Oh, that hurt. Number 34 is Guild Saga Vanished Worlds, an old-school isometric party-based RPG. It features adorable pixel graphics, gentle but fitting music, nice sound effects, and a somewhat clunky UI. As one would expect, it has you walk around, talk to people, complete quests, fight monsters, get loot, solve puzzles, and read letters to learn more about the world. The characters are adorable, the world building intriguing, humor gentle, and much appreciated. The presentation tastefully stylized. What annoys me is the aforementioned UI. Loot all should be effortless. Same goes for some other actions. Right now, the easiest way to accomplish that might take 1 or 2 more clicks than it should, instead of being an afterthought. You never want people to have to make a conscious effort to manipulate UI, rather than doing that intuitively and just getting on with whatever they were trying to accomplish to begin with. That is, you want them to make meaningful choices, not grapple with the means of accomplishing them. Still, that's a minor gripe. The game is fascinating, and I'm curious what comes next, though I'm not flawed enough to give it a 5 out of 5, though I was tempted to. On the 35 lies Harold Halibut's side-scrolling adventure game. Its voice acting is good, as are its sound effects, with the graphics featuring weird uncanny 3D claymation, a strong artistic choice. The gameplay, you could have guessed from the genre. You walk around, talk to people, complete assignments. Let's focus on what sets it apart from the rest of the pack. Old school, like with Fish, since you know this takes place underwater, on a distant planet. Still, this isn't exactly SpongeBob in space. The setting is brutal. Our eponymous protagonist lives in a bureaucratic dystopia where nothing ever works, prices are high, and Earth, our beloved homeworld, has been destroyed, or so we're told. As you might imagine, the story is somewhat interesting, though everything is intentionally drab and boring, including the apathetic protagonist. Traversing locations is slow and tedious, there's very little to interact with outside of key objects and people. This feels very linear, even for an adventure game. Once again, it all fits the dystopian theme, I guess. Though I see this commitment as a bit of self-sabotage, as it makes everything in the game feel painful, sluggish, and pointless. Also, I'd be remiss, the damn demo took 54.05 gigabytes. What exactly are you doing with that space? It was the biggest download of the entire NextFest. 4 out of 5, good game overall.
I'm afraid, sir.
Under 36, Hex Guardian. No, this is not a millennial attempting to express disdain for a British newspaper using NetSpeak. This is a tower defense game, you know, with hexagons. It's got a low-poly style to it and unobtrusive music. This has you place towers, repulsion troops, use abilities, and buy upgrades like any other tower defense game. The twist is that you get to expand the map. This means that you can put enemy spawn points further away. Better yet, you can actually close them off by making loops. The simple tile-laying mechanic has profound and fascinating ramifications. I've managed to cut the spawn points down to a single portal once, and then lose anyway due to a swarm of tiny boats. The game lags if you pause at the start of the Sandstorm, which is a single bit of shoddy coding in an otherwise competent title. There's some room for improvement here, but the game's innovative enough to earn a solid 4 out of 5 stars from me. Airships are not coming, ground troops are not coming. This is a loop around my kingdom, like a racing track. And the only thing I have to worry about right now are boats. Game number 37 is Indica. It's a story-driven 3D puzzle thingamagic. It's got beautiful, intricate 3D graphics, pixel graphics for the UI and things, and perfect voice acting. It has you go around completing objectives and trying to unravel a mystery. I'm struggling to adequately describe it. It's a thinking man's Stanley's Parable. This game is everything. It's got a nun and a dark story starting with a conversation amputation, but it's fundamentally light-hearted, sarcastic comedy. The setting seems like the real world, but with horrifying shadowy beasts and steampunk technology. The graphics are highly detailed, realistic 3D, except for everything that's retro pixel graphics. It's story-heavy, but you collect points as a fundamental element of it. You level up and upgrade your repentance skill. You have a narrator all of a sudden, and she can hear the narrator, and she talks back to him. What is this game? I'm not even playing too far into the demo. I've got to experience this fresh down the line. 5 out of 5.
No! Rapist is better than a murderer, right?
Narrator, stop! Under number 38, we have Internet Cafe Evolution. It's a management game where you manage an internet cafe. It has adequate Sims-like visuals, somewhat annoying music, voice acting is in Chinese, and subtitle text extends beyond the text box and doesn't let you scroll through it. The game sees you place objects, upgrade hardware, hire people, and so on. There's an endless mode, a story mode, and challenge modes. Unfortunately, it just feels wrong. For one, fundamentally, things don't snap properly onto one another, which is a deal breaker in this sort of game. The UI is somewhat annoying, and that text box issue is a glaring omission. The game itself isn't particularly gripping, despite having potential as a concept. The dialogue holds the game and quite frankly outstays its welcome. All in all, this is bad. It's a poorly put together title, 2 out of 5 stars.
好，我知道了，我马上联系。啊，这么牛，人才啊！
Number 39 is Kill the Crows. It is an isometric shooter with a supernatural Wild West setting in which you play as a one-hit point wonder. The graphics are somewhat retro and sound effects are satisfying. The gameplay is delightfully straightforward. You gun down goons to charge up your showdown ability and then unleash it for massive damage and an automatic reload. The game is very basic, there's no escaping it. The whole demo was this single screen and 100 enemies. I was done in about 5 minutes. Despite that, the game is absolutely gripping. It's much easier to sell across the hype if you're talking about a complex strategy game with mind-blowing graphics. That this game is not, but it is a delightful experience, and that's arguably the only thing that matters. 5 out of 5 stars, it is a very good game. No. 100 out of 100, oh no! Game 40 is Kitchen Crisis. It's a cooking-themed automation tower defense game. The presentation is isometric pixelated minimalism that is adequate though plain. The music is other unremarkable, ditto for the sound effects. The gameplay revolves around setting up a kitchen in hell. You put down ovens and cutting boards, spawn clones of yourself to man the stations. You designate the delivery sites by upgrades, and then you watch the food fly. The serving process is automated. All you can do is use a consumable in a pinch. Consumable. The game certainly puts an interesting twist on tower defense. Setting up a kitchen layout that doesn't end up dysfunctional is surprisingly difficult. On a less pleasant note, the UI is on the basic side, and aside from not looking very nice, it's also rather clunky. It's filled with model layers, that is, you have to navigate to a particular window every time you want to check certain things. That's the sort of info you should be able to pin on the side and have the ability to consult on the fly. The game might also be a bit too complex for its own good. Buffs go all the way down to customizing the travel speed of every food item with potatoes and so on. 4 out of 5 stars. Curious. Number 41, ladies and gentlemen. Level Unknown Backrooms. What do you think this is? If you had one guess, what would it be? Don't bother, it's an eerie Backrooms walking simulator. Its graphics are grimy, generic 3D assets. The sound effects are forgettable or absent, though the game has one jaunty tune, so there's that. In this game, you walk around, solve some puzzles, interact with weird objects, read some spooky text, and presumably mostly stumble around in bafflement. Look, the concept of being trapped in an inexplicable in-between, an interdimensional corridor, is a fascinating one to contemplate and may even make decent book material, but by its very nature, such places are largely long, unremarkable stretches of scenery. There's little gameplay to be had. I see that some parts are supposed to be scary, but I don't know how much the game commits to that notion. The physics don't really add much to the experience. You can toss objects around, but they don't really interact in interesting ways, so you're just digging through trash. I get the concept, but this is bad. 2 out of 5. 42, Lightyear Frontier. What was the question again? Anyway, the game's a crafting setting game with no automation features in sight. No conveyor belts as far as I can tell. The graphics are beautiful. You get a mysterious alien world, flora and fauna alike. Yet the atmosphere is largely cozy. The voice acting is good and the sound effects nice. In Lightyear Frontier, you collect lumber and stone, craft a camp, grow crops, clean up gunk, feed alien creatures, and explore mysterious ruins. The most peculiar thing about this game is how comfortable it tries to keep you. The premise of landing on a planetary equivalent of a deserted island can lend itself to a lot of tension, if not outright horror. Over here, you have an orbital AI imbued with a sense of southern hospitality, guiding you through everything, providing encouragement and advice. The threat level also seems slim to none. I wasn't exactly blown away, and this will not necessarily be everyone's cup of tea, but I think for some people it might just be the right mix of mechanics and setting. 4 out of 5, it is a good game. Some resources, unimpressive. Oh, and that is it. Well, 43, Luminanite. Oh no, it's this one. Luminanite is a narrative-heavy detective adventure game. Its graphics are stylized and cartoonish, the music is good, there is no voice acting, the text is available in Korean and English. The game has you walk around, talk to people and solve mysteries, I presume. Here's the problem. The translation is just terrible. I don't mean spelling mistakes, I don't mean unusual, unidiomatic choice of phrasing, I don't mean occasional slip-up and rookie grammar butchering mistake. I mean, it's so bad, I'm not even sure what they were trying to say. I refuse to play a story-heavy game with such issues present. In particular, I'd consider playing a detective game with such a flaw to be asking for trouble. You can't show this sort of garbage to an international audience and expect leniency, especially since this is a demo and it's supposed to showcase your product. Fix your damn text. Otherwise, this may be a nice enough noir game for all I know. 2 out of 5, it's bad and I'm being generous. Untranslated, this is absolutely pathetic. Number 44 is Magical Delicacy. It's a cozy cooking simulator with decent graphics and soothing music. The game involves a bit of platforming, some quick time events, tracking recipes, talking to people, collecting ingredients, and making food. This one's weird. It's filled with accessibility features, which is a nice gesture. It's also somewhat bland, to stick to a culinary metaphor, not spicy enough. Kid-friendly, perhaps? Perhaps trying to be cozy and non-threatening a bit too hard? It also has pronouns listed on characters, which is a worrying sign, but there's no further lunacy of this sort, at least as far as I've seen. I expected excellence, hence the disappointment, but it's a good game. 4 out of 5. They do! And 5 is the top tier. Correct. People. Oh no, they have pronouns. I may have made a terrible mistake. Number 45, Maniac. You know how some people buy the cat a toy, open the box, and the only thing the cat appreciates is the box? You know how in theory you could just get your cat a box directly? Similarly, you know how the Grand Theft Auto series contains elaborate narrative experiences with witty satire, but a contingent of people just want to steal a car, drive around, and cause mayhem? Well, Maniac has you covered here, because that's all it's got in all its top-down glory. The world is low poly, the icons cartoony, the voice acting decent, the sound effects somewhat subdued, and the music jaunty and nice. You go around, steal cars, collect money, visit upgrade dealers, get ammo and health, cause carnage, and try to survive until the timer runs out. I have to admit it was quite satisfying to run and drive around, blowing stuff up and causing chaos. The game is also decently tongue-in-cheek about the whole thing. 4 out of 5. A shame the World Dominatrix wasn't available yet. Santa, no! Number 46 is Menace from the Deep. It is a Lovecraftian deck builder with meta progression. It's got a dark, twisted look of an Occidental cartoon with good voice acting and satisfying, meaty sound effects. Within a given run, you play journey cards to pick the next encounter or event, which creates a different dynamic from the usual adventure graph, since these cards sit in the respective piles until you use them, allowing you to save up healing or a shop visit until you need it. You get resources, both short-term ones to use within the run and long-term ones for meta progression. This again creates a curious dynamic since short-term resources are needed to win and long-term resources are needed for that to mean anything. Obviously you have combat encounters, some story events with choices, and you fight a powerful eldritch abomination at the very end. The demo quite explicitly assumes you're gonna fail, which I didn't. I've managed to defeat an old god by throwing sand in its eyes and then blasting it with a shotgun. Good stuff. I can see it's getting relatively repetitive relatively soon, but it's an amusing tale of macabre and madness. 4 out of 5 stars ominously aligned in the night sky. Victory has been achieved! Number 47, with no barcode on the back of its neck, is Millennia. It is a 4X. It's got really beautiful graphics, except for the combat ones, which are jarringly underwhelming. It's got a perfect clean UI and nice ambient sound. The game has all the trappings of a 4X, and yet it is quite engaging. Perhaps that says more about how I approach 4Xs. Its notifications are somewhat puzzling. You get notified you can select a new action, but not that the old one got completed. Might be a matter of fine-tuning the settings. There's a nice worker assignment system here with sane automation. There are plenty of civil engineering projects available for you to transform the tiles within your zone of control as expansion, wall for scouting, finding landmarks, plenty of units to build. I was enthralled. They only give you 60 turns, so it cuts off just as it's about to get good. Or as you've fallen far enough behind, it's about to get bad. I was incredibly pleased with this one, especially how clearly it got information across, with clear icons and ever-present tooltips that stack. Overall, wonderful. 5 out of 5 stars. No. Under 48 lies Morbid, the Lords of Ire, are Souls-like. Its graphics are dark, gore-filled, and disturbing. Definitely polished, but not on the highest level of polish you see from industry giants. Nevertheless beautiful. The ever-important sound effects are punchy and satisfying. The game lets you fight monsters and use items. You can sneak up on enemies and slay them that way. In combat, you can lock onto targets, and then you need to play footsies properly, keeping your distance. You also need to watch your stamina and not just your health, or you might find yourself with the reflexes to dodge or attack at a crucial point, but without the resource necessary to do it. I've loved it. I actually got around to playing the previous game, which had a more modest presentation and scope, but basically all the same mechanics. Also, I really wanted to know what the lady's name is, and I think she doesn't have one, for reasons related to surprisingly detailed world building. Anyway, clear telegraphs, wonderful heavy atmosphere, very satisfying to play, unexpectedly alluring, quite frankly. 5 out of 5 stars. Number 49 is Mullet Mad Jack. It is a heavily stylized, ironic FPS where you need to score kills quickly enough to extend your time limit. The presentation is retro 80s styles with gratuitous Japanese splattered everywhere. The game has you blast robots, destroy the environment, go through tight corridors, and save a princess. Of all the titles here, this is probably the one, the perception of which has been the most heavily skewed by personal taste for me. But I can't stand it. I like humor, I like when it's subtle, I like when it's rather absurd. One could hardly accuse me of having a pole firmly lodged in my rectum. I am a pole, and we're not matryoshkas. The game's too ironic, it's trying too hard, it's too on the nose, it lacks any subtlety to it whatsoever, it lacks finesse. The gameplay is gratuitous, but that's not only fine, it's great. The technical side has been competently handled, but the narrative and presentation are the equivalent of dumping the entire contents of your salt shaker onto the plate. Instead of enriching the flavor, it's now inedible. 3 out of 5 from me, but do make your own mind. Oh, you've gone too far with this. Yeah. Number 50 is Necrosmith 2. Following in the footsteps of its predecessor, it is an indirect control strategy game with permanent upgrades where you assemble monsters from body parts. The graphics are relatively uninspired cartoonish 2D sprites. The interface is somewhat clunky and seems designed with touch controls in mind. The music is bizarrely cheerful, the sound effects noisy and repetitive, eventually growing into an unbearable cacophony. At least the cat you're familiar is cute. The game is tedious and boring. You assemble your brain-dead troops and give them basic orders, then release them into the world and either hope they get the job done or take matters into your own hands and defeat the purpose. This demo, like life in Hobbesian State of Nature, was nasty, brutish, and short. You get more tools than the previous game to nudge things in the right direction, but watching the units meander is still disappointing. Compare this to Majesty and what it did to indirect control. 2 out of 5 stars. It's mostly frustrating. Now please don't end things for me. The fun has only just begun. God damn it. Number 51, Nevergrave, The Witch and the Curse. Aww. It's a Metroidvania roguelite with town building outside runs where you play as... Well, that's debatable, we'll get to this. The graphics are highly deformed chibi anime, the music charming and upbeat, the sound effects nice and with a touch of oomph. The enemies are as menacing as they are adorable. The game has you run dungeons, pick up items and buffs, then go back and rebuild the town. What I still don't know is who I'm playing as. There's a witch and a hat. As the two separate, you'd ordinarily expect the hat to stay motionless and the witch to go do her thing, but it's the other way around. The hat goes to do its own thing, and the witch slumps motionless to the ground. Hell, the hat can summon the witch back to itself. I think we play as a hat wearing a witch. But bizarrely enough, this is never really addressed. Anyway, the game is adorable and entertaining. It expects a controller, but fair enough. Voice acting would be nice as well as more lol. 4 out of 5 stars. Oh, so the lady says, no, I don't want any HP. I don't want to eat the delicious cake. Really? News Towers Game 55, but that's hardly news to me. It's a business management game where you are a newspaper publisher in 1930s New York. The graphics are simplified, abstracting away the clutter so you can get a clear overview of the situation. The music is perfectly suitable, the UI thematic, and the sound effects satisfying. The gameplay has you discover news stories via telegraph operators, pursue them by sending reporters out, typeset assemble and print them, manage the building, win over districts, work unscrupulously towards your shady hidden agenda, and place parted plans. People love parted plans, they also love clocks. I love this one. It's one of my personal favorites, if not the favorite game from the entire NextFest. It's the Citizen Kane of video games. Well, at least in terms of the plot, I guess. 5 out of 5 stars. Baby rescues cat in the desert. I'm sorry, baby rescues cat? My goodness, front page news. Miller, get on its stats. What a story. I mean, it may very well be fake. I don't know, and I don't care. Game 53 is Nimrod's Guncraft Survivor. It is an uninspired survivors-like. It features unimpressive sprites, a tedious music loop, and relatively wimpy sound effects. The gameplay has you go on runs to unlock meta progression features. There's no particularly unique selling proposition here. Once again, it's not like the game's particularly flawed. It competently implements all the rudimentary elements of an overcrowded genre, and that counts for basically nothing. It is boring, banal, and unremarkable. 3 out of 5 stars. Meh. What do I do with this rocket? Well, 54 Oddsparks, an automation adventure. It's an automation game with adorable cartoony graphics, wonderful soothing music, and charming sound effects. In Oddsparks, you collect resources, designate paths, deploy your little minions, and have them perform tasks. All of that in service of completing quests. That's helping the people of your post-apocalyptic fantasy village. The game is enthralling, captivating, wonderful. Your little slave automatons are adorable, and the presentation, pacing, and everything else is great. Setting all these facilities up is gratifying. I'd love to see where the story will take us. The weird forest creatures are also lovely, the little animal hybrids. By the way, the plot is Clark's third law in action. I think this may be a wonderful game to introduce someone to the automation genre. It's not intimidating. It rather gently gets across the engineering intuition of there must be a better way, and shows you how you can offload the repetitive tedium through automation or delegation, so you can do something else in the meantime. 5 out of 5 stars. Brilliant. What? 55 is Orc Warchief, a colony management simulation game. It features good isometric 3D graphics with good animations, underwhelming sound effects, underwhelming UI, and actively disappointing voice acting, which was poorly AI synthesized by the sound of things. The game has you order buildings to be constructed, assign workers, and complete quests. Combat is available, but in a separate mode for now, and it just lets you deploy units without the ability to control them in battle. The UI is disappointing. You can't, for instance, select units to remove them in deployment mode, and plenty of stuff requires you to invoke individual modal windows over managing from some overview screen. I'm not impressed with much here. The story isn't particularly gripping, the orc theme isn't strong, and everything lacks character. The game gets the basic mechanics right on a surface level, but even building placement can get glitchy. Improvement is needed both on design and execution levels. 2 out of 5, it's bad. Game 56 is Outcast, A New Beginning. It's a story-based single-player TPS with exploration and combat. I say that with confidence since the demo was literally divided into 3 parts: exploration, story, and combat. The graphics are beautiful, Unreal Engine 4, the sound effects are punchy, the voice acting great, and the background music gentle. The presentation is cream of the crop. The gameplay has you run around, shoot enemies, and complete objectives. Now let's address the elephant in the room. This is a sequel, and it's a sequel to something I've really wanted to play for a while, but didn't. Even though nothing was stopping me. The intro to the original game is one I remember fondly. With all of that in mind, I hope you'll understand why I didn't check the story portion of the demo. That aside, the gameplay here is wonderful. I need to get better used to flying, but that's on me. This is a 5 out of 5. '57 is Pacific Drive. It's a sci-fi crafting story-rich game with beautiful detail and appropriately stylized graphics. You have your rusty gear and sparkling tech, the eerie anomalies and verdant greenery. There's also wonderful voice acting and good sound effects. The game has you drive around in your special car, upgrading it, looting what you still can, tearing things down for materials, and trying to find a way out of the exclusion zone. It's enthralling. You get sucked into a bizarre warped anomaly that was somewhat shoddily sealed off and need to work with its inhabitants and features to hopefully try and get out. I really regret that I didn't have the time to linger, but I would ultimately love to learn about every piece of gear, all of which have the in-game and info entries. I'd love to loot everything, listen to every conversation in general, explore everything this title has to offer. It's a 5 out of 5. Okay, never mind! Never mind! I've changed my mind! Store it! Yeah, get in! Get in! Put it in drive! Turn the 8. Pepper Grinder under 58, it's a 2D platformer with a drill. It's got adorable, lush, cartoony graphics full of glimmering detail and life. It's got a wonderful music loop that didn't get on my nerves. The sound effects are also very satisfying to hear. The gameplay has you drill through everything. It's like the visual manifestation of Maslow's hammer. You use the drill to dispatch enemies, to get loot, to unlock things, to battle dive. It's amazing, and I've managed to tame it on a controller. Well, not tame exactly. It was on the bleeding edge of my skill the entire time. It was so fast, I barely had the reflexes and skill to make the right adjustments. It literally felt like being on a roller coaster, and it had me sound the part. That is, once I figured out that you move relative to the screen rather than character position. Either way, 5 out of 5, amazing. This is so stupid. I love it. Stick your drill in it. Duh. Game 59 is Prim. It's a point-and-click adventure game with black and white 2D graphics, cute, eerie music, great sound effects, and wonderful voice acting with a tinge of Valley Girl. Deaf Valley Girl, I guess. You play as Deaf's daughter on a silly quest to find this mortal boy and help him in some capacity. To do that, you collect, inspect, combine, and use items, traverse locations, the usual. The game's adorable. It's supposed to be short, which is fair enough. The world is a deliberate mix of macabre and cute whimsiness. The demo is admittedly rather short itself, but promising. Oh, and the expected release date is unrealistic. Despite that, 5 out of 5.
And German.
Wenn du mich fragst, klingen alle diese Sprachen, als wären sie
No!
ausgedacht.
Please!
The game will have a playtime of about 6 to 8
German
hours.
death.
We're confident that we'll be able to release it in 2022. That all sounds pretty ambitious, right?
Inkfest in Ink. Game number 60 is Realm of Ink. It's an isometric arena roguelite. The graphics have bold black outlines to go along with the Ink theme. It's got Chinese voiceovers with English subtitles, adequate suspenseful music, and acceptable sound effects. The game has you go through rooms, buy upgrades both temporary and permanent, and fight enemies and bosses, afterwards picking the next room to proceed into. The plot is intriguing, involves the protagonist rebelling against the hackneyed story she was supposed to play a part in, and forging her own path. Fighting through a seemingly hopeless gauntlet of foes to achieve her dream of being free from oppressive top-down narratives dictating her every move, and instead having the ability to make her own choices, quite possibly in a much more comfortable, mundane life. It's a competent title, needs more polish. English voiceovers are a must. I can't read lengthy exposition in the middle of combat. The core gameplay loop is fun, but somewhat unremarkable. 3 out of 5 stars. I hope she can free herself.
由我决定，
Damn
你
right!
算什么东西？
My will is my own. Pathetic. 61 is Rotwood. It's a single-screen roguelite beat-em-up. It features cute, cartoony, occidental graphics, lovely music, beefy sound effects, all of which are delightfully charming. In the Rotwood, you travel across screens, collect upgrades, fight enemies, heal, make choices about branching paths, fight bosses, and return to camp to make between-run decisions. It's a delightful little title. The graphics and animations are really spectacular. They're whimsical and cutesy, but also really intense. They breathe life into this strange little world we're stranded in. On the mechanical front, the fights are incredibly fair. Attacks get clearly telegraphed, so you only have yourself to blame if you get hit. The writing is good, the skill selection spices things up. It's a brilliant title. 5 out of 5 stars. No, roll. Very simple attack to dodge. I thought I was gonna die. 185 HP, but I vanished if barely. Under the rather unassuming number of 62 lies a dark and terrible secret. Rusty's retirement. Perhaps I shouldn't have even bothered with this one. It's an idle farming game that is supposed to just be the bottom of your screen as you're doing other things. It features simplistic pixelated graphics and extremely basic sound effects on extremely few things. In Rusty's retirement, you can buy and designate some things, and everything else just happens as Rusty himself lazily saunters over to take care of matters. Let me put it this way. I absolutely have better things to do, especially if I have other things to do. Even people with ADD will easily find something more exciting to fidget with. You know how the sorts of things that are designed to be collectible end up being the least worth collecting? Similarly, this is among the least exciting things to do on the side, and I would rate it beneath staring at a wall. 1 out of 5. Get this out of my sight. I'm just slowly dying over here. Screw this. Number 63, game number 63 that is Shadow of the Depth, which sounds colorful but in hindsight makes no sense. Anyway, the game is a top-down dungeon crawler. It features decent cartoony graphics, unremarkable sound effects, no voice acting, and rather bland and unremarkable music. You'll forgive me for remarking on the unremarkable, but at least I'm not the one trying to show you how depth can have a shadow. It's a game where you kill things in a dungeon, get loot, teleport around, descend for more of the same. Sometimes you get locked into an impromptu arena, which is exciting. It's another title that's fairly basic and competently executes a familiar formula in the most uninspired and creatively bankrupt way imaginable. Another so-so Chinese game on the list. To reiterate, it's not bad. Then at least I'd have something to talk about, but nothing really makes it good. 3 out of 5. 2 to the 6th power, it's 64, and the game is Shapes 2. It's a game about putting things together, making automated workflows. It features largely abstract and utilitarian, but aesthetically pleasing graphics, ambient music, satisfying UI sound effects, and very subtle machinery noises. In Shapes 2, you extract your basic circles and squares, then move them around via conveyor belts and catapults to be processed, cut in half, stacked, and so on. I liked this one. It It's very analytical and sterile, but what it does well. I wasn't endlessly sucked in though, and unfortunately I can't specify the missing ingredient. Once again, could be a personal matter of taste, and this game is clearly good, hence it'll get 4 out of 5 stars from me. I need a circle and a square. Number 65 is Shelter of Exiles. It's a grindy hack and slasher on a grid. It's got cartoonish graphics with enormous made-for-mobile UI, no voice acting, flimsy sound effects, and anemic music. The gameplay has you walk across hexes in real time, slaughter enemies, then equip the acquired gear back in town only to proceed to the next level. As mentioned, it's a grinding experience, unrewarding. The clash between discrete tiles of space and continuous passage of time is jarring, although it makes sense for a mobile game on a small screen. The core gameplay loops are there, but there's nothing particularly appealing to them. The plot and writing are also just outright lazy. 3 out of 5, entirely forgettable. No, destroy the spider nest. Oh no! Execute remarks on game 66. Nobody cared who I was that I described Soul Mask. And nobody will, even when I do. But let me tell you, it's a crafting survival game, either PvE or PvP. It features beautiful Unreal Engine graphics, soothing music, and nice sound effects. The game has you run around, craft things, hunt animals, and unlock some powers of your magical mask. Somebody stop me. I'm not particularly fond of these types of games. They're open-ended and social, 2 things I don't particularly like. I can take a bit of busy work and resource gathering, but there wasn't much keeping me engaged. There's a reason I've never played Minecraft. But hey, I've built some stars over here! As far as I can tell, yeah, this is not the future of gaming. But it's an elaborate and respectable title. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm almost guessing here. Well! How crafty of the creators. Fair enough, this is about as far as I can go. Game 67 is Star Trucker, a sci-fi cargo hauling simulator. It's beautiful both in terms of sound and visuals. There's some voice acting in the form of radio chatter. The UI is crisp, both the one within the game's narrative and the one outside. The game has you fly around, picking up contracts, hauling merchandise, and in the process visiting far-off places. It's a delightful little gem. It has managed to wonderfully and skillfully blend 2 distinct themes into something that feels organic and so obvious as to be an afterthought. Maneuvering in weightless 3D is tons of fun. My only objection would be that an object in motion should stay in motion, so when I go out of my truck, as it's moving but not accelerating, it shouldn't leave me behind. Or was it still accelerating with no active input? Either way, 5 out of 5, sane people don't perform maintenance on moving vehicles. Whoa, no! Wait, that's not how we're come back, truck! Oh boy. Number 68 is Stormgate, a real-time strategy. This is going to be one of those first impressions that screams skill issue. It looks beautiful, it's got some temporary assets, but everything seems reasonably polished, the animations are fluid. My only objection to the way it looks is that everything is so well blended that team colors can get lost in the shuffle, and ultimately the visual spectacle should play second fiddle to the ability to recognize things at a glance. The title seems perfectly competent. It does, however, feel like a straightforward StarCraft ripoff with no particular added value. Notifications are underwhelming. Things just happen, and they don't really draw attention. Unit complete, dead, research done, new stuff available, whatever. It may or may not have happened. I know for a fact that I wasn't in the tip-top shape to play it, and that memorizing the units and the tech tree are required to make sensible decisions in the heat of battle. Still, the game is beautiful and seems to do well what it sets out to do, yet I remain unimpressed despite how much I want these guys to succeed. It just feels bland and uninspired on every level. 4 out of 5, it's good, I guess. Number 69 is nice, by which I mean it is a nice game. It's called Sword of Convalaria. It is a tactical RPG with chibi pixel art graphics, punchy sound effects, and Japanese voiceovers. It sees you manage your team, then enter tactical combat where you take advantage of terrain and defeat enemies while countering their types. There's a story campaign, but there's also supposed to be a multiplayer component that will be free to play with microtransactions. I don't like the idea of microtransactions. Beyond that, Look, the story is probably damn a dozen for these types of games, but I am intrigued and would love to help these cute little waifus change fate. The tactical combat has potential, although the beginning missions were laughably simple to 3-star. The controls are controller-friendly, but the interface looks awkward and more like a mobile game, with enormous buttons jumping out at you and multiple menus to navigate to if you want to look something up. That's somewhat inconvenient. Oh, and the cat's voiceover wasn't exactly fitting, but whatever. It's actually some sort of a cosmic being. Besides, am I suddenly an expert on how cats are supposed to talk in Japanese? Oh, and I love the tarot card motif. The game starts out with the full form, the major arcana. This feels arbitrary, but it's a 5 out of 5. Go, little waifus. Oh my goodness! Number 70 is Synergy, a bizarre colony management game. It's got a very distinct style that I struggle to associate with anything in particular. It's very strange and alien. The sound effects are appealing and the music is calm. The game has you gather resources, assign citizens to buildings, conduct research, arguably the sort of thing you'd expect from a genre. Despite that, it's all rather strange. The creatures you take care of are humans nominatively, but they live on a distant alien planet and have technology and culture quite distant from ours. Much like us, at the very core, they too farm, learn, and shield themselves from the elements, but they otherwise seem uncanny somehow. It's most fascinating. It's this oddness that has piqued my interest, and if nothing else, the discoveries made while attempting to further tame this strange and alien planet are what I look forward to. I give this 4 out of 5 stars, possibly ones from outside our galaxy. 14 citizens available, send 10 on the expedition. Game 71 is Terra Memoria, story-heavy tactical turn-based battler. It's got adorable cartoony graphics, cute sound effects, gentle music, and no voice acting. In Terra Memoria, you walk around, complete quests, and fight monsters in granular turns, where initiative depends on the move used, and enemies can be shunted back to act later. This is, of course, in stark contrast to systems where units each act once a turn, in whatever order. The mechanics of combat, with a system of elemental weaknesses and the advanced initiative mechanics I've just mentioned, have already piqued my interest. But this game has so much more to offer. The writing and presentation are whimsical, charming, and amusing. The game is backed by very strong and distinctly original world building. There's so much depth here. And I, for one, look forward to seeing what the life of the foxy lady who has spent 10 years in the spirit realm will turn out to be like. 5 out of 5 stars. Failed my teachers enough as a major Cossack. Who ever heard of a summoner without spirits to summon? If I did anything wrong, darling, I'm sorry. I promise I'll find you and apologize. On the number 72, we have Terratech Worlds. It is a crafting game on an alien planet with modular vehicles. The presentation is attractive. The alien planets look nice. The little blocks you assemble stuff out of are cute. The sound effects are satisfying to listen to. The game has you drive around, collect resources, shoot competition, and build ever more advanced tech. You'd think man versus man, except vicariously via machine, would be the biggest conflict on offer. But no, it's actually man versus nature. Gravity in particular. Gravity is a cruel mistress. My strongest memory of this game is one of struggling to drive uphill. The puny laser you used to crack all deposits open with also could use a boost. At one point I've managed to lose half of my wheels, which made driving uphill even more of an issue. Presumably the disappointing output of everything leaves room for upgrades, and navigating is a matter of better rover design and manual dexterity. There's a lot you can do here, and you can customize quite a bit. Not exactly my cup of tea, but the game seems good. 4 out of 5. Rated. '73 is Thrive, Heavy Lies the Crown, a fantasy city builder. Its graphics are beautiful in detail, its UI snazzy, its music wonderful, and its sound effects adequate. The game has you build stuff, designate workers, make choices when presented with scripted forks in the road, and follow the mysterious plot. Speaking of which, this game is basically feudal society discovering Tiberium. The plot is gripping. The mechanics work reasonably well, although the tutorial frustrated me because it forced me to auto-load what I've patiently loaded up manually, but that's a minor concern. Overall, though some additional tooltips and other improvements can be added, it was a very solid, well-polished, inspiring, and promising title I'd love to explore in the future. There's also multiplayer promised, but I'm not sure how interesting that would be over having control over time and managing your people on your own. 5 out of 5 stars. It's a historical moment. It's these tiny incremental improvements that help the most. Plus 5% productivity for the outfitter. Yes! Game number 74 is Tribes 3. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. It's a multiplayer FPS with plenty of verticality, from what I understand, and as can be seen from the number at the end, it is another entry in a series, a reasonably cherished one, I think. The graphics are adequate, gritty sci-fi feel. The sound effects and voice lines are competent. The game has you slide and jetpack around trying to nail opponents with slow-moving projectiles. There's capture the flag though, but possibly other modes are or will be available. Look, I'm not a fan of this series. I'm not particularly good at FPSs, and the game seemed largely unremarkable. Yeah, you slide around, but so what? I fail to see the appeal. It doesn't seem to do much of anything wrong, but doesn't appear to do anything interesting either. That's probably heresy for Tribes fans, but that's as much as I had the time to glean. 3 out of 5, unimpressive.
We've captured the enemy flag. The enemy is taking our flag.
3/4 under 75 lies Ultros. Ultros? It is a 2D Metroidvania with psychedelic, ultra-colorful, saturated graphics coupled with goopy, subdued sound effects and no voice acting. In Ultros, you slice foes and then eat them to unlock memories. You also plant little seeds. Your objective seems to be to defeat a boss far into the dungeon or spaceship. Everything is a jumbled hallucination. You need to break the illusion before you go completely insane. What I recall, unfortunately, is the game glitching out on me and not letting me eat or plant unless I reloaded a checkpoint. Doesn't sound like much of an issue until you realize that healing is also obviously something you do through ingestion. Other than that little issue and questionable keyboard bindings, this is a bizarre feast for the senses coupled with solid fighting mechanics. I like it. Risks were taken here to make the game very distinct, and you can't deny it that. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm going to eat it. Game 76 is Until Then. It is a visual novel of sorts, with some walking around. I hesitate to call it an adventure game. It's got adequate, if basic, pixel graphics, no voice acting, minimal sound effects, and good music. It's underwhelming. The protagonist is an annoying loser. The interactivity is minimal, and the writing isn't particularly charming either. The presentation is barely adequate, including embarrassing glitches like the cursor going missing under certain circumstances. Perhaps the depth of plot can redeem this game further down the line, but I didn't get that far, and would not get my hopes up. 2 out of 5. It's bad. Much appreciated. You're gonna make me select things? You are here, and where exactly am I going? Alright, I'm absolutely docking points for incompetence over here. Number 77 is Welcome to Paradise, a crafting survival RPG. Its graphics are stylized to be semi-realistic, the music is jaunty, the sound effects decent, and the voice acting rather unremarkable. The game has you walk around, complete quests, collect items, craft things, and order your zombots around. For you see, this game embraces the post-zombie apocalyptic concept of trying to harness the brain-hungry fiends, rather than merely exterminating them. In the haven of Paradise, this is done via mind control helmets. Having some equipped zombots do your bidding appears to be a fundamental part of gameplay. Other than that, it's a humorous and rather elaborate romp through a shoddily resettled planet. It looks promising. I didn't find it exceptionally groundbreaking nor captivating, but it's a solid title. 4 out of 5. Permit to unalive. Fair enough, I guess. The penultimate title, Game 78, is Winter Survival. It is a survival game with crafting. The graphics are intricate and realistic first-person 3D, and the sound effects are compelling, as is the voice acting. In Winter Survival, you craft things, take care of the bare necessities of life, raid places, go crazy, and then die from exposure. The game is genuinely scary in a very primal way. Makes you feel vulnerable, exposed, desperate to deal with the elements and wildlife. And that's all despite me trying it out with the easiest settings possible. I also suck at these games. You may surmise that it didn't leave me particularly well disposed towards itself. But it did. I didn't like the experience. I was not having a good time. But the sense of urgency, desperation, isolation, and dread it made me feel was nothing short of spectacular. And, I would dare say, unprecedented. 5 out of 5, I'm staying home. Dude, no, The final game on the list, game number 79, is yet another fantasy title. It's a tongue-in-cheek fantasy game with a GTA-like style. as you ride horses, cast spells, use weapons, complete quests, and respray your halls. The graphics are nice isometric 3D with decent animations complementing them. The music is appropriately stylized, the sound effects underwhelming, and dialogues simlish. Long story short, the concept is interesting, but the execution somewhat underwhelming. I'm not sure what the fatal flaw is. Maybe it's the perspective, which unlike in GTA is neither top-down nor close to the avatar. Perhaps on the other hand it's the atmosphere, which is intentionally silly, but thus cheapens everything. Perhaps it's the combat being sensible and fair, but rather tedious. Possibly it's all these things and some other ones, but the upshot is that I wasn't into it since there wasn't much to it. 3 out of 5, disappointingly mediocre.
For the prayers of my people, take my right to the throne, and hang your head, my courtyard, a symbol of the dawn of a new age. I am the chosen one foretold by the prophecy, and I've been lying to doctors. You're a moron.
Well, there you have it, 79 games, each with a 1-minute overview. Wasn't that something? I think there were some pretty impressive titles there. I hope you've enjoyed this video, thank you all oh so much for watching, and you will see me elsewhere.